Good afternoon, guys. Our first lightning talk speaker is Mr. Brian Bidat. Mr. Bibat was a trainer and consultant at Exis, a product development firm specializing in Java development and Ruby on Rails. He graduated in 2004 from UP Diliman with a Bachelor of Science degree in Computer Science. He is an active member of DevCon and the Philippine Ruby Users Group. To give us a talk on what it takes to be a web developer, let us give Mr. Brian Bibat a round of applause.
Hi, test mic. Let's just test if the clicker works. Okay, it works! Yay! So, oh well, not really used to using much. Anyway, so for DevCon we were given a list of topics. So I'm Brian Bibat. So I've been a web developer for 7 years. So I took this topic: what it takes to be a web developer. So the question is, well, first question: what web development tools are taught to you in this college, university? JSP, PHP, .NET. Okay, so that would make my life easier because some colleges don't really teach that much web technologies. Anyway, so the question is, what does it take to be a web developer? Okay, so the answer is easy. You just need to know HTML and PHP. So thank you for listening. That's my talk. No. So seriously now. Web development isn't really that simple. As we all know, it's not. It's quite complex. So before we continue, let's take a brief look on what is a web developer. For some web developers, this is what they use to build websites. You have your PHP, you have your HTML, CSS, you have your JavaScript, you have your CMS of choice, say WordPress, Drupal, or Joomla. Me, I'm a freelance web developer. If I want to create a simple web application, this is what I use. That's just for simple web applications. Now, for more professional people, let's say like Nelvin out there, they use this on their everyday work. And that doesn't even include the tools that we use. So, well, and that's just the Ruby stack. If you're using Java, if you're using .NET, if you're using PHP or Python or JavaScript, you will use a different tool set, not just this. So, now would be a good time to go back to our question. What does it take to be a web developer? So I can just answer HTML and PHP. If I have to give a quick answer, my answer would be you need a passion for learning, just like Jerry mentioned a while ago. So why a passion for learning? Well, obviously, if you don't have a passion for learning, you won't have the patience to learn all of these stuff that we use every day. And another thing, as Jerry mentioned a while ago, the pace at which new technologies are being released into the wild is very, very fast. For instance, this was me in 2005, hard at work as a web developer. Back then, these technologies didn't even exist yet. And if some of you are familiar with them, jQuery, Git, Ruby on Rails, they either aren't even existing yet in the case of Git, or they aren't even stable like Ruby on Rails. And right now they're being used by millions and millions of developers. So in just a span of 5 years, 6 years, there's a lot of new technologies. That's why you need to have a passion for learning. If you don't have a passion for learning, I think it might be a good time to take a good hard look at your life. If you're not interested in learning new technologies every year, new technologies, new methodologies, well, it's no problem. Say, for instance, until the mid-20th century, the rise of the knowledge worker, people were fine with the limited skill set. like these factory workers. So your grandparents, great-grandparents, they were fine with this type of work. And they were okay, they had a family, they had good lives. But for you as a software developer, if you're not, well, ready or passionate about learning new technologies, you're really limited to doing two things. Well, the first one is what Jerry mentioned before, legacy code maintenance. A lot of code right now is still running on COBOL, still running on legacy languages, say like Natural, RPG, and so on. The pay is good because there's not a lot of developers for that platform anymore. But, well, your sanity or your overall happiness is not guaranteed. So the other thing, if you're not really interested in learning, well, you could be like these guys who sell substandard software to clueless clients. Or in short, you could scam your clients. Well, there are still a lot of clueless people out there. You could earn a living, but again, it's not really that ideal. Oh, there's another thing. If you don't want to learn, there's always a third option. You could always go there, or IT support. So if you want, if you're not planning to go to call centers or scamming people, I think it's a good time to start learning now. So web development, so where do we start in web development? Web development, well, it's a big field. We could simplify that using this diagram. There's really 4 major fields in software development. You have your presentation, infrastructure, SE, and domain. If you're a freelancer like me, I have to be competent in all of them. But for most people, they could just focus on 1 or 2 and be good with it. Say, for example, web designers, they're just focusing on the front end, the presentation, how it looks. Say, for people who are fresh grads and are poached by multinational companies, you'll be an enterprise dev, so you'll be focusing on the business side. So you'll be focusing on the domain. And if you're a sysad or a database administrator, you'll be focusing on infrastructure. So I have around 3 minutes. I'll just briefly discuss what those 4 things are. So the presentation layer, that's what the users see. That's the front end. So if you want to learn about that, you have to obviously start with HTML, and you have to move on with JavaScript for animation, and then transitions, and so on. And if you really want to be good, you're going to have to cross beyond computer science, IT, and you have to go to the fine arts people and the mass comm people, learning how the user experience works, like these books by Edward Tufte and the Don't Make Me Think book about web usability. Then the next is the domain. This is what you're being taught, well, basically in college. This is how to translate the user requirements, solve their problems using programming. For learning the domain, you don't really need to focus on a certain language because any language will do. But if you're going to be developing for the web, you have to learn about RFC 2616, which is the HTTP protocol. This is a paper available on the web. But of course, I know you guys aren't really that patient to read that. You could just skip to Wikipedia and read the summary of what it works. But basically, that's how the web works. If you don't understand how the web works, how can you build web applications? And while you're in Wikipedia, you could study also the other things that aren't really covered in your courses, like SQL. SQL is actually more important than the programming languages you're being taught in school, because when you're dealing with data, that's more important than the actual processing of data. Okay, the next is the infrastructure. Well, it's not really important for you guys because I don't think you're really that geeky to focus on the infrastructure. But if you want to learn about the infrastructure, about databases, the web servers, how to set it up, well, you could start with building a LAMP stack. Well, install Linux and install the LAMP stack. If you don't want to dual boot your computer, you could try virtualization. If you're feeling hardcore, you can always use Amazon Web Services for free. Then the next is, the final part is software engineering. How do you build software? It's a very broad topic. There's a lot of books that you have to read to cover that. Say, so building software, project management, managing people, object-oriented programming, and so on. That's how much you need to learn, and that's not really covered in college. If you want to know how big you have to learn, this is Code Complete, the first book. This is 860 pages. That's how much you need to learn about software engineering. If you want a more, software engineering, when you read those books, you realize that programming languages don't really matter. It all boils down to just two basic languages, C and Lisp. If you know these two languages, you could learn any programming languages, programming language in a day or whatever. Then, just to wrap things up, if you really want to learn more about development, not just software engineering, but everything else, you could visit these sites, InfoQ, News at Y Combinator, Hacker News. These are where new technologies are often advertised or announced. And if you really want to improve on your craft, well, this is the site that you go to, programmingmotherfucker.com. Because if you're a software developer, you're going to go through Waterfall, CMMI, Agile, software craftsmanship. All of them, they're just stepping stones to programming motherfucker. When you reach that level, when you're just programming, you're already a really good programmer. Web developer or whatever, mobile, whatever. And that's it for my talk. Thank you for listening. If you want to see the slides, it's already uploaded in SlideShare. And I don't think I have time for questions, but maybe later. There's an open forum. Anyway, thank you for listening, and have a good night.